Someone mentioned earlier this fantastic newspaper, Fight Racism, Fight Imperialism, which has 4 pages on Palestine in this issue, 4 very good reasons to buy it if you don't already. It also has 2 pages on the Cuban Revolution, celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Cuban Revolution. And in the overview, which I wrote myself, we ended up by saying that for 50 years, the Cuban people have resisted imperialism. Well, we're here today to talk about resistance to imperialism. However, their best form of resistance has not just been in asserting their national sovereignty, but in creating an alternative model of development which places human beings at its centre. They have consolidated their socialist revolution without dogmatism, without fear of criticism, without compromise, with imagination, creativity, and integrity, developing, improving, and prospering. So the Cuban Revolution is respected around the world, as this slogan shows, not just for resisting imperialism, providing military support to revolutionaries overseas, for its socialist welfare system, most famous its health and education systems, and all the basic statistics are in the pamphlet, which Sam indicated is here on sale. Excellent summary of the history and developments today. Leading human development indicators, access to clean water, infant mortality, all these very important women in parliament, for example. Internationalist education and healthcare programs. The next issue of the paper will have at least a page on Cuba's internationalist healthcare programs, so that's another reason to get a subscription. And biotechnology industry, which should be an article on that in the following issue of the paper, and ecologically sustainable development, achievements in sport and culture, including, of course, art and music. So the Cuban Revolution over the last few years has seen significant economic growth. Between 2005, growth has been between 4 and 13%, and that includes in 2008, where it was at the lowest of these statistics, it was 4.3. That was a lot lower than planned, partly because of devastating hurricanes which hit Cuba and cost the island about $10 billion. Some have said, however, that this is just down to Venezuela. This is just thanks to Venezuelan oil and the relationship with Chavez. So let's just deal with this question, get it out in the open. Is Cuba falling into a new dependency? That's the argument. Before it was the Soviet Union, and now it's down to Venezuela. Well, we can do 2 things. We can look at the actual statistics, right? We can say that in 1990, 66% of Cuban exports went to the USSR or Russia, right? Today, approximately 25% of Cuba's exports, that's including services, including all your educators and your doctors, etc., go to Venezuela. So even just looking at statistics, it's a lot lower. The relationship is a lot less intense, we can say. So Cuba's relationship with Venezuela is actually part of a process of diversification of trade, which has opened up trade between Cuba and many countries around the world. And it was a conscious policy. It was a policy Cuba had always wanted, but was particularly imposed on Cuba with the collapse of the Soviet bloc, all of the socialist bloc countries, with the loss of 80% of its trade. Okay, the other thing to say is we can answer this politically. We can answer this from a different perspective. The dependency between Venezuela and Cuba is a mutual dependency. So Cuba was able to provide the professional capacity which Venezuela needed, and that was traded for oil and for finance. I remember seeing Chavez. I had the good fortune to see Chavez speaking in the Plaza de la Revolución, the Square of the Revolution in Havana, and he made it absolutely clear. The Venezuelan Revolution was based on the constitution, a new democratic constitution. They had to get it elected in. With the poor people in Venezuela unable to read and write, how are they going to vote for a constitution? So the fact that immediately after Chavez took over in 1999, Cuban educators were there teaching people how to read this new constitution so they knew what the revolution was bringing them, they knew what rights it was granting them, and they would vote for Chavez. and his new government was formed. And Chavez is very clear, without that support, we would not be here today. Right, okay. But it's more than that. It's more than just a mutually beneficial exchange or barter. It's based on political alignment and ideological imperatives. It's based on cooperation, not competition. So David was talking about how what these countries are doing in a collective way is removing their resources, their people and their natural resources from the pool of imperialist exploitation. Cooperation, not competition, is a slogan that children in Cuba are taught from their first days in school. And this is now a slogan which is entering international relations, or certainly in South-South, South America relations. Now, it's not the first time. There has been a history of pan-Latin American liberation, or attempts at liberation. We have, as fine examples, Simón Bolívar, who was the Venezuelan who fought against the Spanish, José Martí, again a Cuban who fought against the Spanish, but always talked about nuestra América, our America, which is, by the way, why you have to be very careful when referring to America. Remember that the Cubans themselves are, in their own consideration, American people. Okay, so Nuestra America, South America, free from US imperialism. He warned about the danger of the imperialism in the north. Maximo Gómez, a man from Dominica, who fought with the Cubans for their own independence. Fidel Castro, who in 1947 went on an expedition which was planned to free the Dominican Republic from a dictatorship, and also was in Colombia the following year in 1948 and helped in an armed uprising there. And of course, Ernesto Che Guevara, Argentinian who fought in Cuba and then, well, after fighting in the Congo, also died in Bolivia. So a Latin American hero. But as well as these attempts at these people who have fought for Latin American liberation, there's been many attempts at Latin American economic integration. I've put a whole load of letters here. I don't know if I can even remember them myself, but you've got ECLA, which is the Economic Commission of Latin America. This is the Central American Common Market, the Latin American Free Trade Agreement, Special Economic Latin America Commission, Andean Pact, another one to do with energy sharing organisation, and a special economic Latin America relationship. So all of these from 48 to 75. Now, why is there so many? Well, clearly, partly there's so many because the previous ones failed, right? So it's a big question. Why did they fail? Well, they failed probably because they were based on competition, not cooperation. They were based on capitalist exchange, on capitalist relations. And countries started to compete with their own, the other members of the coalitions for more investments from the US. These were all dominated in some way, if not by the direct presence of representatives of imperialism, US and European, then the whole focus of the integration was to be better trading partners with the imperialist countries. Okay, so the last one of these was set up in 75. What happened by the next year, when the Argentinian military took over, the entire southern cone of South America was under military dictatorships. We had the introduction of Operation Condor. The military intelligence of all these military governments met together and carried out the most horrific campaign of basically what amounted in some countries to genocide, a campaign, a witch hunt against any progressive or left-wing forces, against trade unionists. They used assassinations, they used imprisonments, they used torture, disappearances, right? This was Operation Condor, with the full support, in fact, set up under the impulse of the CIA, and there's a quote from the director of the CIA saying, "We're working on getting these countries to coordinate their efforts against communism."